What's the question again, Rainy? Please.
So in essence, the soul, how can something, or does the soul dissolve that when that state was material things? Because I didn't quite understand how that could be, how something could dissolve, but.
And I agree. And Barbara, you were saying about the energy.
I was saying that energy never dies.
Right.
And I mean, it changes forms, and so that energy, the energy of that individual, maybe changes forms and starts again somewhere. Starts the journey again somewhere at some point in time.
And that in itself, speaks to the idea of reincarnation. Energy can change forms, but it's still energy. So I don't see any difference in the energy that gives us delights and the energy that we are. It just has a different function. And it takes on, it's the same form, but it does different function. Because it's either light waves or light particles. And I don't see how light can become nothing. Now, if it says that no thing, that's a whole different ballgame than nothing. Because nothing speaks to non-existent. No thing means that it's not formed into anything in particular. I think you got it, Rainy?
I guess I'm still mulling over it. So in essence, that consciousness, the purpose of it has changed, or something, the energy, and it has a different form now. It doesn't, like I was thinking of the ones that stay intact and reincarnate almost, they continue a certain path or task, whereas the ones that don't, the purpose of bringing transformation to others may be completed, but that energy itself changes somehow. I don't know how to explain what I'm thinking about, but it being intact as a soul is no longer necessary or feasible. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does.
From a reference standpoint, are you speaking about the part when he was saying the souls that were having trouble with transitioning?
Yeah, the ones that stayed so close to the physical that they dissolved. That was the word that was used. That was what I was talking about.
Okay, so you're talking about the souls that themselves that had trouble transitioning, dissolving. Those specifically, you saying they did dissolve or they didn't dissolve?
He said those who who were attached to this material world, their souls dissolved. And to me, that's saying that their souls were non-existent, or were in a state of what? There was no state at all, because if it's dissolved, there is no existence for it. Now, if he said the soul, he had said that the soul was transformed, that's something different.
But the thing also about dissolve is that dissolve doesn't mean that it ceases to exist.
Right.
It just means that it mixes with whatever. So I guess this is a funny example, but you making Kool-Aid and you put the sugar and the flavor, whatever, it's not disappearing. It's just dissolving as if therefore changing state. And those particular souls who were, I guess for lack of better words, hell bent on holding on to the physical material
So would they dissolve into the energy that sustains this material world as opposed to energy that seeks to transform it into something more positive?
I would say slightly. I would say not necessarily something that is more so positive or negative, but being slowly forced into a different type of a light in terms of like electromagnetic spectrum, being forced into essentially a different frequency, a different vibration, but then to be pushed there slowly so that they could make a safe journey there, even though it's begrudgingly, on their part. Because each level that he was actually talking about, it was as if they still had a lot of work to do and had to make the same exact journey that the other souls had to make as well. It's just that they were fighting actually doing it, and so therefore it's like these many ladder steps for them to go along that same journey.
Rainier?
So it sounds like to me though that they had to be moved from where they were consciously. I mean, and as if their consciousness had to be separated from that energy in order for that energy to transform or move along, because the consciousness associated with it kept it bound in a state that it couldn't stay in forever. So the dissolution wasn't necessarily of the soul, but of the consciousness that was binding it in a state and time and matter or whatever.
Well, even consciousness is a vibration, vibrates at a certain frequency. And so I heard what Sheldon was saying about perhaps it relates to a changing of the frequency, which aligns with what you're saying about a change in, if they're so attached, a change in consciousness is a change in frequency or vibration.
So would the bottom line be the difference is being in the world and not of the world? Which by that I mean if you are in the world but not of it, then you are living by the rules of the kingdom or of the kingdom of our Creator. However, if you are in this world, you are, and of this world, you are living by the rules that's set by this material world. And if you live by the rules that's set by the material world, and that is your primary focus, then to some extent you do become one with the energy once you transition or once you exit the body, as opposed to this other being one with the energy that created everything.
The other thing too is that the book is written from an Eastern perspective, and so when the person says dissolve, and that's the word they use, does not necessarily mean the same thing as dissolve the way Westerners define something that's dissolved. So, I mean, we're speculating from that perspective, I think. But if you go beyond the speculation into energy and spiritual things, and we know that energy never is destroyed. So, I mean, it's changed somewhere else. It's changed. The frequency has changed, and
okay. If we take the example that Sheldon gave, right?
Yeah.
And couple it with what you just said, then it would be that it, even though it has become one with, it is vibrating at a different frequency, because the sugar is different from the water that is dissolved in, but it vibrates at a different frequency. So if that being the case, are we saying that or is he saying it vibrates at a different frequency than this energy that sustains the material world, or different frequency of the energy that sustains everything that is?
Could be.
I'm leaning more towards it being at a different frequency than the energy that created everything that is, because of its attachment to the material realm.
I saw something about this scientist, physicist, who's working on something to prove there were mirror worlds.
I read that, parallel universe.
Yeah. And even in the book, the writer talks about there may be a frequency that is different from this reality, but it's so close to this reality that it seems to be this reality in a sense, except subtle differences. So, I mean,
Could that not be the reality where millennials don't remember Sinbad, and you can't find the movie online. However, those of us who grew up during that era know that Sinbad played that part. So what happened to it? Did we move into a parallel universe where it didn't exist? The millennials see, when you ask them who know anything about Nelson Mandela, if you ask him when he transitioned, the date that he came out of prison is the date that they remember him dying.
mm,
So is there the parallel universe where that doesn't exist with them? And I think that more of them are indigo kids than we know, because of how they think and how they perceive things. We deal with that when we talk about having placed our keys in a certain place and they're not there anymore. We go back and we have looked at before, now they're there. So how did that happen? To me, the scientists of which you speak is making an effort to catch up with what happens spiritually anyway. The idea of proving that those worlds exist says to me the motivation to do that came from something that they picked up in the macro. So, because otherwise, I don't think they would have any interest in it at all. There are those who say that one of the things that pushed Einstein to do what he did is that he had studied Kabbalah. So it appears as though whatever we do in the realm of the spirit is always, in the area of science, is always inspired by something that has transpired spiritually. And that is the reason, maybe, that Christianity demonized science. The scientists of the early eras of Christianity were considered heretics, like Newton and the gravity thing. So again, I don't know exactly what he meant, and I agree with Mark that we are indeed speculating because the idioms are different. And if we are speculating, then what's happening with other people? I listen at us talk about this, and I think about Ron's mom, right? Like Ron's mom was not attached to traditional religion because it was not responsive to legitimate questions that were raised. It was unrealistic in the demands that it put on people, and it was devoid of any sense of being empowered. So she dealt primarily in the esoteric world, which meant that very few people understood or even cared to talk to her about how she saw things to be. Could all of these things be tied together? You know, could all these things be influenced by, or could we be influenced by not just the book, but also by those who have transitioned, who think that way, or those who are transitioned, who had an attachment to this world, yet they were quote unquote Christians. This is what I mean. Christians are taught that your material assets are the determining factor in how much you've been blessed. Now, would that person, would that soul be attached to this material realm in the same manner as the soul of someone who has the sole purpose of enriching themselves materially? Would that attachment be the same when they transition from the bodies? Or would it be that the one who believed, name it, claim it, sow the seed, the Christian who believed that blessings are based upon material assets, would that person just see it clearly after that person transitions and their soul does not quote unquote dissolve into what the writer was talking about? But the one who is attached to materialism and only sees materialism as a justification for their existence and identifies with that their soul dissolves as opposed to the other one. Because both of them are attached to materialism, but from different perspectives or in different ways. Any comments on that? Okay, none. So, having said all of that, how can, I don't understand how, let me harken back to to Jesus. I don't understand how anyone can actually look at what the scriptures teach and not be able to, at the very least, speculate about the esoteric world as opposed to the material world. When I read this book on melanin, and if I just take the melanin out of the conversation and just use the Eastern way of thinking versus the Western way of thinking, then it becomes a question of being able to process. What I mean is that the Eastern mindset is that of a esoterical nature more so than the Western mindset. It sees the spiritual. It not only sees it, but it becomes one with, or is one with it. It is one with nature. It is one with everything that exists. as opposed to the Western mindset being you manipulate, control, you take possession of all of these things that are visible to us through our eyes, as opposed to being one with it, with everything that exists. Can you see that? And the only remedy for that is to bring balance to this whole idea of the Eastern mindset versus the Western mindset. I see that balance differently maybe than a lot of people do. I don't know. I see the idea of that balance being represented when we see an African marriage and a Caucasian marriage, and that produces an increase in melanin in the offspring of that relationship. Can you see that? And I see that as representing balance. So when we talk about the idea of the browning of America, we're talking about balance. Does that make sense? And that balance could never be brought with a separation of what we call races. When in actuality, it's talking about with the separation of the possessor of more melanin versus the possessor of less melanin, or the one who has a Eastern mindset, because even though we have been in this country for generations, being enslaved, we still have within us a large part of the Eastern mindset because of the way we talk. And I was thinking on my way down the road that we've talked about how feminine energy, how the elderly females or the older women in the village are the ones who actually are the sources of wisdom. In the case of the woman being the wisdom being feminine, that's what I'm trying to say. Now, who do we look to for wisdom in our communities? We always talk about grandmother, don't we? And it's only recently that we've begun to say, the reason children have issues is because they don't have that wisdom of that grandmother because they're becoming grandmothers too young. Now, that in itself is the Eastern mindset. The idea of shouting. That idea of shouting has nothing to do with the aspects of Christianity, but everything to do with welcoming into our midst ancestors. So this mindset of this Eastern mindset that Jesus spoke, that Jesus lived with, is the same mindset that we have to a greater degree than we understand. Does that make sense?
Ava DuVernay introduced a film called Daughters of the Dust. I started watching that, and it talked about the families of the Sea Islands off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina. And I guess I forget who wrote it, but she must have written it when she was a film student or something like that. Anyway, it has this matriarchal atmosphere in which the elderly woman was centered as the person of wisdom, and it talked about the stories that were told, which is based on what the sages did too. The midrash. It told stories to keep you attached to the culture, and I don't know of anything, any counterpart of whites in America that have that same kind of concept. It's the stories and the wisdom in the stories that were part of the group and held them together and kept them tied to part of the culture that they came from.
And family ties were stronger.
Yeah.
And because when you mention that about not seeing that kind of wisdom or that kind of setting with the culture of white people, you don't see that strong family structure either. Even though we have been labeled as those who have a huge breakdown within the family structure, there has never been one of the culture in terms of the type of family structure that we have. Because think about it, our family structure does not exclude people who are not biologically ours. Our family structure embraces everyone. It's like the dynamics are so different of that family structure. Like if we look at it from the structures of this society or the Western mindset, then Jaden would be my cousin, not my grandson. You see? Now, why would he be my grandson? Why would he call me Papa? Because his mom was reared in our house as one of our children. Now, that structure goes back to our beginnings. So we do have a very strong Eastern mindset. And I think that if the book that Nick suggested if it did anything, and it did a lot for me, but I believe that it brought about this discussion where we are beginning to see with a greater clarity not only the benefits, but the presence of the Eastern mindset that we have, not just in family structure, but even in the way that we speak, in the things that we expect of each other. The idea of respect, the idea of placing value on life more so than things, the concept of being truly our brother's keeper as opposed to our brother's manipulator. If we look at the difference in the mindsets, we see things as a means to an end as opposed to the end. We don't, well, I should say up until recently, we don't judge people based upon what they have or don't have. It's based upon their level of respect. However, the Western mindset is based upon what you have and don't have. And a good representation of that is when we look at how if we are in this world but not of this world, it means that we live by different principles than does this world. So when we look at the principles that's in this society, what do we see? We don't see the principles of the kingdom being manifest. What we see is the principles being applicable to certain people, the law rather being applicable to certain people. If we look at our government, it is an amplification of what takes place on the smallest scale. And what I'm saying is, if we look at our government, when it talks about no one is above the law when nobody's been arrested. So if you have money, you have power. And if you have power, you can escape arrest. I.e., judge says this kid didn't rape this girl because he comes from a good family. And the prosecutor didn't realize that by allowing this case to go forward, this girl was running this boy's life. What does he mean by a good family? This is talking about wealth. But the Eastern mindset doesn't see it like that. It sees it. It sees it that from the perspective that it really is. You raped her, and you should be punished for that.
And this judge actually also said his definition of rape was different.
Yes.
In that he said rape is usually by two or more people. Blah, blah, blah. How does he remain a judge?
And that's
It's
I'm sorry. And that's why you can't do it, Barbara, because you can't wrap your mind around that. You can't wrap your mind around a concept like that. You know, the idea of being a Christian, of being a Bible believing person, and you can come to conclusions like that. The idea of being a Bible believing person, and you can watch people starve to death, and it doesn't faze you, or put them in concentration camps. How can you be a quote unquote Bible believing person and allow things like that to happen when we are clearly taught that you are to not only feed those who are hungry, but you're also to embrace your enemy?
That's because we don't see ourselves as that common family.
Right.
That's
That's
that
it.
principle.
But the Eastern mindset does, and we, for the most part, retain a large portion of that Eastern mindset, and we have to embrace that. Everything that the Eastern mindset offers, the Western mindset calls it superstition, calls it pagan, but the Christian, the idea of a Christian mindset, if we look at it from how Christianity is practiced and taught, it is another way of saying greed. That's all. But if we look at the spiritual aspects of it, from the community that Jesus lived in, walked in, then we began to see it totally different. We began to see what he meant when he said things like, I was in prison and you didn't visit me. I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you gave me no water. Those kinds of things.
And what are our religious authorities, how do they define, how do they differentiate what happens with putting people in concentration camps and what the Bible says about, I am my brother's keeper? Again, the issue is if I is that separation. I don't see these brown folk as my brothers.
Right.
Because I'm not brown.
And
It's a physical kind of definition rather than a spiritual.
And the idea of that of if you are of the Caucasian persuasion, then it is awful for you to be in a concentration camp. Yeah, and never again is what you always hear. However,
How do Jewish people see it, Pastor? Do you have any kind of idea about it?
Some of the Jewish people were in the beginning offended when the cages were referenced as concentration camps because they were not being quote unquote tortured and killed. However, they are being tortured, and there are other Jewish mindsets of people who said that this is not but tantamount to a concentration camp. But again, think about what's being said here. It's no different than saying I'm not a racist because I have black friends.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh.
it's no different than saying when Biden said that his position on busing was not racist, right? Okay, if Biden's position was not racist, why was it not? Because he said it wasn't. And this can't be a concentration camp because we say it's not a concentration camp. We are the ones who define everything that is. That's the mindset that has to be altered. And that mindset has no place in the scriptures. Please be still. Has no place in the scriptures at all. It has no place. When I say no place in the scriptures at all, I'm talking about the religions can justify it, but the scriptures don't. And even with the scriptures only mean what the Western mindset say they mean. Beyond that, they have no meaning. So how do we change that? We are in the process of doing it by changing ourselves. Because again, if you can't be light to yourself, you can't be light to anyone else. If you can't be the adage, if you can't be true to yourself, you can't be true to anyone else. This whole concept is wrapped up in unraveling the Western mindset that has for so long controlled, manipulated, and been our beacon of quote unquote light that we follow. Because when we if you think about it, our mindset, and I want to get to some things in this earth, our mindset about education was to get educated so we can help someone else. That was our mindset. But the Western mindset was get educated so you can make some more money. So, and I can go on down the line. Now, how is it that the Western mindset became so predominant in our lives? How did that happen? It happened through Christianity, religion. And it is perpetuated through religion. The whole concept of charismatic religion is about greed. Because it is based upon God wanting everybody to be rich, isn't it? I know the settings that I traveled in were simply about the acquisition of wealth. Now, if you look at that and you see every place where Christians have gone, you see the indigenous people as suffering. This morning I was telling Shafiq about, we were talking about the condition in Alaska now, 90 degrees. And they're not accustomed to it. None of them have air conditioning. They don't even know what a heat stroke is. And she said, I bet they're trucking air conditioners in now. And I'm like, I doubt it. Because the people can't afford them. Because the very people who caused the climate to change are the ones who took everything from the indigenous people. So they can't afford to do anything other than suffer the consequences of the actions of other people. Unless we intervene and bring things to a place of balance. Does that make sense? And the intervention is beginning to be seen. It's not beginning right now because the intervention started a long time ago, but it's beginning to be seen now. And the way it's beginning to be seen is not because you can put your hand on something that is 100% different now. It's being seen because we're beginning to see things exposed that we never were aware of before. And if we were aware of it before, we were not in a position to do anything about it because we thought in order to change the hearts of men, you had to change the laws of the land. But when you change the laws of the land, they were changed in such a manner that they could be circumvented anyway. Yeah,
And
so-
interpreted as they want to interpret it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So then, as we see, as things seem to be worse, like the comment today that climate change has sped up 50%, it's not a doom and gloom type thing. It's a sign to show us that change is occurring. More things are being revealed, such that we actually have to see the truth.
Yes. See, change comes when things reach critical mass. And critical mass is not determined by us. It's determined by the one who governs everything. When I say us, I'm talking about our natural way of thinking. Now, I do believe that the soul, the energy of the soul, shapes everything and prepares it for change. And when we talk about the energy that controls the earth, right, or the light that influences in a positive way, how do we reconcile that with the notion of having been told to dominate the earth? So, if we have been told that we are to dominate the earth consciousness, then we are the ones who put this in the macro and bring about change. How does that work? Well, the change comes from the depths of our souls, simply because we desire that to happen. We are not conscious or aware of everything that we are not only capable of doing, but also that we are currently doing. Can you see that? We're not aware of that, because the God who changes things is us. Now, what have we done when we say we don't want to shape it, but we know that it needs to happen? What are we talking about? What we're saying is that we don't want to use our minds to shape it. That's what we're saying. Our thought processes to shape it, because it is the process of thinking the way we think that has brought us to this place.
And
Now-
the other thing too is that when we use our minds to do it, we put limits on it.
Yes.
Whereas if we tap into limitlessness, and it shapes itself, there's some things that happen that we couldn't even thought about saying through our mind's reasoning.
Right. So what happens is our soul. Our soul is what. Our soul is what actually takes what we desire and manifests it. And when I say our soul, I'm not talking about, I don't particularly care to use the word souls as much as the universal soul, which is actually energy waiting to be created into something better than what we have. The energy that makes up this universal soul is the energy that responds to our creative nature. Does that make sense? And our creative nature is not something that's governed by our mind, because if you really look at it, the creativity of our minds have only brought us to a place of comfort for ourselves, as opposed to a place of comfort for humanity, which is actually spiritual. One of the things that always comes to my mind when I think in this way is how Tesla had a plan to bring electricity to everyone, to the whole world at no cost. And Gary, who was financing his endeavor, found out what was happening, and stop the professor, distracted. Getty, who was financing his endeavor, pulled his money back. And Nixon, Tesla did. And electricity is available only at a cost. So with our mindset, it's about our comfort. But with the thoughts of the soul, it's about the comfort of humanity. And this comfort of humanity is not necessarily a physical thing as much as it is a sense of harmony that's in the lives of all people without regard to their outer appearances. Any questions about that?
Yeah, James, I don't have a question. I just wanted to, respond, to the mention of melanin. And I believe that, the biochemical substance in terms of us being created as who we are and the substance that we have in us, I think that mindset change to be able to understand that, is very helpful because it now empowers us to realize the importance of the pineal gland or the pituitary gland in terms of what we have in us that is so powerful to be able to go back and understand that. I think will help us to appreciate the change of our thinking, to know that we have this richness in us to be able to change humanity, and everyone has it, but at the same time, to a certain extent, we are blessed with this particular, chemical substance that we need to appreciate and understand more. So I just wanted to share that thought in terms of really understanding melanin and how it helps us to be able to appreciate where we are in the present and where we can go, in terms of our further development, in terms of who the created us to be. So I just wanted to share that thought.
Well, that's a mouthful. Because, see, to me, melanin is life itself. I see melanin as a manifestation of life itself. Because everything that lives, everything that exists has what? Melanin. Now, as that creative force that you spoke about, George, and the power that we have, I think that power has been damaged by how we eat and how we think about ourselves. I also believe that when we become comfortable with the truth about who we are and our existence in relationship to melanin and what it is capable of doing through us or with us, when we become comfortable with that, that is when things change. The discomfort with it is not because we don't believe it. The discomfort with it is because we have been taught to hate ourselves. If the shoe was on the other foot, if the Caucasian had this melanin, then it would be on the forefront of everything. We'd be discussed in classrooms in every place. I cannot remember discussing or speaking of melanin in any class that I had in secondary school or college. And I'm talking about my chemistry, my biology class, anatomy, physiology, none of those. Do I ever remember talking about melanin? Do you, Bob? In none of my classes. Why? Because of its nature. And everything that George was saying is spot on. Why? Because when you look at creativity, when you look at forgiveness, when you look at the emotional balance that comes to this earth, when you look at the idea of having a family structure that is inclusive of humanity, period, when you look at that, all of that is based upon melanin. All of it. It governs not just our creative essence, but it also governs how we respond. It deals with our emotions and every aspect of our being, which carries me to another place. And that place is when the scripture talks about the begotten Son. Begotten means to be one with the essence of what brought you into being, or being one with every aspect of that being. Is that not the same thing? Saying that we are one with humanity. When I say that technically speaking, or societal ways of speaking, Jaden becomes my cousin, but based on our family structure, he's my grandson. You see this? So what is that saying? We are a microcosm of the family structure that humanity is supposed to manifest, and that in itself speaks to the idea of the concept of being our brother's keeper. Why? Because without the power of without the melanin, we would not be the creative beings that we are, and we would not have been able to sustain our lives based upon the indignities that we've suffered. I mean, think about this. This country is 243 years old. 243 years old, and has only had 16 years without war. Think about that. This country has only lived without war for 16 years, even though it is 243 years old. What does that say? It says that, to me anyway, that the nature of this country is violent, destructive, selfish.
Aggressive.
Huh?
Aggressive.
Very much so.
Well, one of the things that I remember from the book as it relates to melanin is the fact that it is what gives us the extent of our spiritual connection. It gives us that power to be connected spiritually, and then the creativity. And so when we know where we are connected and how and why we're connected to oneness, and we get that out of the way, then the creativity just flows.
Yes.
You don't have to. Now, once you come to that conclusion about who you are and what you are, then everything else is a given if you allow it to be.
And the one thing that inhibits that, or the one thing, the hurdle that we have to clear, is the idea that races are made up thing. Because when we talk about melanin, the first thing that comes out the Caucasian mouth is we are racist and saying that we are superior.
Why is that? Because they believe they have less melanin?
They know they do.
Okay. Stay with that thought of less melanin. Is it they have less melanin because they have moved so far away from
Their beginning.
their beginning?
Yes.
And we had said earlier that we're responsible for not revealing the truth of that we're responsible for them moving away by not correcting them.
We're responsible for the circumstances that we endure now, because yes, we did not make some corrections down, early on.
Sure.
And then even when we made efforts to make corrections, we tried to do it through a system, a legal system that's already against us. And we have to get beyond this self-hatred. For example, Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was Jamaican. And Marcus Garvey's most fierce enemies were people of color, educated men. Was it Du Bois who said that Marcus Garvey was a guerrilla? And he went through his features and described him as a guerrilla. I mean, ended rather with him saying he's a guerrilla. It was Du Bois who said that. It was. So, what is that saying? Now, Marcus Garvey was really, really dark. His complexion, he was extremely dark, which means that the melanin content was higher. So we diminish that by being ashamed or by trying to shame someone because of their complexion. When the complexion itself is not based on race, it's based on environmental / melanin content. You understand? So we have to get beyond that, and I do see that we are, and I see it in the most subtle ways. Halle Berry is going to be the Mermaid Lady, right? Bailey. Okay. And the other one, what is the other Disney movie that an African is going to have the leading role? What you call it was what's her name? Beyonce was in Lion King. So and then what do you see? You see things on Facebook that's saying that being black on the rise, that kind of thing. It's we in Union we have an African male principal at the high school, and white people have to lose their mind behind it. And I want to raise the question: are you saying that the school can't function with an African American principal? Then we look at the district building, and in key positions there are African females. So that tells me that we are beginning to reestablish pride in being who we are. When during the course of the 60s, there was a sense of pride in who we are. Now, but it's a different kind of pride. The pride now is not about making money, being equal, getting an education. It's about changing the course of humanity for the benefit of humanity. Can you see that? This ship has to be guided by a rudder. And we have to be the rudder for this ship. And our soul have to be the captain of it, so that it can travel in the right direction without regard to the bumps that are in the road. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, the rudder's a little thing,
But it's a powerful thing.
but it can turn
The whole ship.
huge ship.
Yes. And I also see that
Select a level.
I also see that is the reason that people had to fall away, from what we're doing, because everyone can't embrace what we're talking about. People don't want to change their image of what religion, what they are in religion. regardless of how you show with the scriptures that their understandings are not correct, they still don't want to change. And even in the African settings of religion, if we walk in there and talk about what we have just spoken of, then they are the first ones to say we're being racist. And we have been so conditioned to think ourselves racist because we talk positively about ourselves until it has rendered us almost impotent when it comes to changing humanity, when it comes to fulfilling our purpose for being in this earth. And the impotency is not based upon the lack of ability, it's based upon the fear to exercise that ability. I mean, I'm going to give you an example. I sit here, we sit here, we're in this room, on the phone, on Skype, on YouTube, wherever. We sit there, and when we start talking about the idea of bringing humanity to a place of unicity, of oneness, when we talk about the strength and power of the origin of our being, when we talk about or reference melanin, when we talk about the idea of the Caucasian and the attitude being what is destroying the earth, what do we hear? We hear people hang up. I hear people hang up on that because the only thing they want to hear is about Jesus and what we have been taught about Jesus, even though it's wrong. I hear people disconnect because they are expecting a religious discussion, a religious message that coincides with the religion that they have been indoctrinated with, we have been indoctrinated with. But I offer this to all of them and us as well, that you can't serve two masters. You are either going to be the churchy, religious, Christian person who embraces a government and a set of laws that discriminates against you with a policy of racism that's so deeply embedded into the system until those who are racist can't recognize it. Or we're going to be the ones who are forgiving, the ones who are open to bringing humanity to this place of balance without regard to how people feel about us or treat us, embracing everything that the Creator has given us along the way, including our origin, including melanin, including the truth about the mindset of Western people when it comes to people of color. We are at a place where religious colored people don't want to hear that. And I don't mean that in a negative way, I say color. But when I say color, I'm talking about people of color, be they brown, whether they're Asian, Hispanic, African, whatever. This is what I'm talking about. I personally, have to gain a greater sense of comfort so that it doesn't faze me when people hang up because of what we're talking about. To this point, I have been one of those who, I have been the person who felt like I don't want to lose them. I want to bring them along. So there are some things I phrase differently and some things I've said different than I normally would have said it, and that has to change. Can you see that? I can't tolerate biting my tongue anymore or dressing up what I have to say. Why? Because those who are in support of white domination don't have any problem saying what they want to say. Biden didn't have any problem saying that I'm not a racist and what I said was not racist. He had no problem saying that. But the Black Caucus had a problem embracing it. Why? Because for survival. We have to be comfortable with embracing the truth. And the truth of the matter is, what he said was racist. Now, we cannot look at him as being, oh my God, he's a Democrat and he's racist. We can't look at that because that's not the issue. It's not a party issue. The issue is embracing what your soul says as opposed to what your mind is teaching. And the mindset is regulated by the origin of Christianity. Think about this. Most of the people who are the talking heads in media, most of the people who are in governmental positions are Catholics. Most of them are Catholics. What does that mean? That means that the mindset that brought this false teaching of Christianity into being is in control. That's what it means. So when we uproot this, that's when we will begin to see a huge shift. And the reason Catholicism is so prevalent in these positions is because that's where it gets its power. If it were not powerful, how can you have priests raping kids and nobody going to jail? And the institution still flourishes. How can you have that? How can you embrace something that you know is not the truth? If it were not for the support of Catholicism, Christianity, there would never have been slavery. It could not have functioned. So we have to look at the truth. And I shudder when I think about the people who say, well, you are coupling politics with religion when you talk like that. No, I am telling you the truth because the power of the government comes from the Catholic Church. It comes from Christianity, which is a part of a branch of the Catholic Church. That's where the power comes from. So we have to look at this thing through realistic eyes and deal with it in a realistic way. And when we do that, we began to disregard those unrealistic burdens that Christianity places on humanity. We began to reshape the way humanity thinks so that it does not think that it is, or any segment of it, is superior to any segment of humanity. We have to do it in such a manner that we transform the entire world, the world view of things. Because if you look at the world view of things, you will find that without regard to any indigenous people, Caucasians take what they want. And Christianity endorses it every single time. So we have to deal with it as it is, as opposed to how we have been taught to see it. Does that make sense? Now, do I think that other people are going to walk away? Probably. Do I think that there are some people who will call but won't call again? Probably. But guess what? That is not my burden to bear. That is not your burden to bear. The burden that we bear is that of bringing balance to humanity without regard to what it takes. That's our burden. And that's a burden that we have embraced. Any questions about this or comments, please? Do you agree with what I'm saying?
Yeah, numbers is not the issue at all.
No.
Absolutely.
I spoke with one of my nieces who called me this week. One of our nieces, actually, because she's not my niece alone. And some time ago, she had an experience where she was in the other world and could see this world with clarity. And it frightened her. After having conversation with her, George and I, Levon, we have a conversation with her. We talk to her. She's at a place now where she's becoming comfortable with it. She's beginning to embrace it. And one, if we were operating on the basis of church, it would be like, well, how can she do that and she doesn't even study like we do, or she doesn't come to where we are, or we are not teaching her. So how could that be? The point is we are teaching. She is receiving. And that's where the comfort is coming from. You see what I'm saying? And do I want experiences like that? I've had them. Do I want to live like that? Sure. Is she living like that? Yep. Every single day. However, I have been shown that in order to live, to live in this world and not be of it, I simply need to take kingdom principles and apply them to my life daily. And that is being in this world but not of it. Because I don't play by the rules of this world. I don't acquiesce to the powers of this world. I don't. When the chain of being quote unquote political was lifted from me, it freed me from the powers of this world. We are the power in this world. This material world cannot remain the dominant force when it comes to earth consciousness. And the reason it can't is because of the number of people who are in spiritual bondage or actually spiritually dead because they're not aware of their being. If you're not aware that you're alive, you're dead. And being alive is not simply breathing or being in a body. Being alive is mimicking the creator, the image that we were created in. And that image does not see male, female, or color. The image simply sees an entity that was created in this image. And we, being representative of that, must do everything we can to make humanity reflective of that also. This idea of that is already in existence. It just has not been manifested in this universe. It's in the parallel universe. Any questions? Comments? Because there are no questions or comments. I'm done. Okay.
Could you further explain the dissolve situation as well by speaking on melanin? You're talking about the refusal of certain people to actually accept and walk into not only their salvation, but accepting it and acknowledging it and walking in it.
I can see that. Well, Rainier. She must have to go. Okay, I can see that. Anyone else?